So welcome to the Brand Design Masters podcast and YouTube interview show. I'm here with Nicole Osborne at Social Media Marketing World 2020 in San Diego, and Nicole has made time out of her schedule in order to be interviewed for the show, and I'm very appreciative of that. Nicole and I met in a conference in London 2 years ago, and she's been going through a series of changes in her career, which I'm going to let her describe, but going from working on the marketing side in corporate to building a personal brand and an entrepreneurial kind of presence for herself. So, welcome, Nicole.
Oh, Philip, thank you so much for having me today. You know, I met you, I think, a couple of years ago at Upreneur, so I'm so excited that we both have the time today here in beautiful San Diego to chat.
It is beautiful.
Thank you.
Sure. And so tell us a little bit about, say, where you were like 3 or 4 years ago when in that role and what that was like.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a very classically trained corporate marketeer, by which I mean I have a marketing degree, I'm a chartered marketeer, and I worked my way up the career ladder. My first job was at the Financial Times. And when I left the Financial Times, I was a B2B marketing manager looking after their advertising proposition worldwide. And I really loved the job. And I actually really loved working in marketing, and I became more senior. I changed companies several times. In the end, I was a marketing director. But what I really found is I became a mum, and it was really challenging to find a role at senior level. I was a marketing director.
Mother.
Absolutely, I became a mother, and I wanted to have a little bit of flexibility. And because I couldn't find the kind of opportunities which really excited me, because I truly believe life is too short to not be doing something you absolutely adore doing. I thought, well, let's just set up my own business. Surely there got to be a way of making more money in less time and still really enjoying it. So yeah, I set up Lollipop Social.
And so you just put in your notice and said, I'm done?
Yeah, kind of. We like to call this a lot in the UK, where you take voluntary redundancy and you sign NDAs and you cannot really talk about it.
Right.
One of the last things I did, which is
even
really
on the
interesting.
podcast?
Even on a podcast. One of the last things I did was actually I applied for the position as the managing director. It was 3 of us, and I was about 7 months pregnant, and I remember standing in front of the board saying, yeah, the long-term vision, I'm rubbing my belly now, the long-term vision for this company is so and so and so. You've got to do these things when you're ambitious.
Right. Oh my gosh, that is such a funny picture.
It is, I know.
And you're like, okay, something's wrong with this picture. I don't know that I'm credible here, telling my long-term vision when I'm 7 months pregnant.
But you got to do it, right? I think if you're ambitious, you got to do these things, just push yourself. And I knew I wasn't going to get the position, but the point was just, I wanted to make, of course I'm still very ambitious, you know. I might be a mum soon, but...
So you're on the marketing department of a corporation, and we were talking just before we hit record here, but you were on the, having been on that side, you were getting courted by your agencies. You were always being taken. Explain what that's like being in corporate.
Well, it's actually wonderful, right? Because I guess as an in-house marketeer, your job is to choose the best agencies for the job, who deliver on time, who deliver value, who are creative, who get what you need, who actually help you to get buy-in from your senior team. I remember, you always, as a marketeer, have to get buy-in from your finance director and position return on investment. But there's also a lot of fun element, because when it comes to agencies, we don't just work with a brand, we work with the people behind it, right? So agencies would take us out. I remember I was based in Southwark Bridge when I was working at the Financial Times, really beautiful area of London, and we were taken to the Tate Modern, and we had like champagne receptions, and we would always get a lot of presents for Christmas and lots of nights out. I tell you what, it was really good fun. Because obviously our agency contest would make sure that we as a client had a really, really good time, and we usually did.
Absolutely. So you were kind of living the high life.
Yeah, I would say so. I was very good at enjoying that, yes.
Yeah, I know what that's like. And so then you had kids and you decided to go out on your own. So that, I can imagine, was a shock to the system?
It really was. It was rather scary, because I guess particularly at the time in my life, I'd just taken redundancy. I was feeling the impostor syndrome. And when you set it on your own, the one thing really is to appear confident, even when you're not feeling so confident. Because if you don't feel confident, why would any potential clients want to trust you and think you can add value to whatever marketing challenge you're trying to help them overcome? So yeah, it was really, really tough. I had to do a lot of soul searching. There were some dark moments as well, but I believe, as long as you always have a good network around you, I had a business coach at the time, which really helped. You can do it, but it was hard, yeah.
So I find it fascinating when people who were at senior level positions leave them and then are hit by imposter syndrome when they were senior level, they're
Yeah.
making a great salary, working as a marketer in a corporation. There's validation and personal identity that goes into that kind of a role. And then when you leave it, that personal identity somehow evaporates a little bit, and then there's a vacuum, right? And sometimes that self-doubt or that kind of loss of an aspect of your identity comes into play. Did you feel that?
Oh, completely. I think you nailed it there. You're so used to when you're in a senior position, you have your team around you, and hopefully if you're a good leader, they're very supportive of you, they make you feel great. And all of a sudden, it's just you. And one simple example, we're so used to making a business case for perhaps a marketing investment, a new system, or a new campaign. But all of a sudden, we are the ones we are selling ourselves. We are selling our services, our expertise, and it feels very exposed because working in a corporate also brings the benefit that you're kind of part of a corporate branding machine. And in a way, when you are a marketing director, you set it. So you love the vision of the company, and it's your role to champion that and to be part of it. And you are so used to it that, yes, you have your own voice because it wouldn't be authentic if you didn't. But it's much, much scarier doing it all by yourself as opposed to being part of a big machine. Mm-hmm. Whether it's like brand guidelines, so you help everyone across the company to adhere to these brand guidelines, and all of a sudden it's just you. So what does that mean? What does your brand mean? How do you want to be perceived? That's scary.
So, and you were probably working in a team. You had a lot of resources, so you could delegate to people, right? And then suddenly you have only one person to delegate everything to, which is you. So talk us through what it was like as you moved into your entrepreneurial, your own business. Mm-hmm. What was the first thing that you had to address? How did you build it? Did you, was it brand identity first, strategy first, customer avatar? How did you think through that and build your own brand?
The first thing for me was actually cracking social media, how to promote myself on social media, because I was so used to working with some amazing agencies and delving into strategies and delivering those. But I actually wasn't really able to do anything myself. I remember sitting there, I was so scared of just sending a tweet. Yep. So that's one of the first things I addressed. I got a lot of additional training, very bespoke to where I needed to be, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, so I invested a lot of money to have quick and fast training. And then the other thing I did, you have got to figure out really quickly what you're good at. What could you potentially be selling? Because it's very hard in the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. If you learn a new skill and you then sell that new skill, I think it's much easier in a way to think, okay, so looking back at all your career, what have people always said, what's the great thing about you? So I went through that sort of soul searching, and I must say I was lucky, or maybe I was just very good at going to interviews. I got my first sort of gig really early on, which helped. I remember I interviewed at a paid media agency where we were looking for a contact and marketing director, and at the time I didn't have a lot of clue about social media, but I was just invested in this course, and I said, look, hire me. What I don't know now, I will know in 6 months' time. And I was so confident they did. And
as a contractor.
as a contractor,
independent person.
And that really helped at the beginning because it kind of gave me that regular income, and it allowed me to sit back and work on my own branding, on my own marketing, because I had some money coming in.
Okay, and so you were on retainer?
Yes, so I was on a retainer with them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it full time or was it half time?
No. Gosh,
so
completely half time. Yeah, it was maybe sort of 1 or 2 days a week.
Yeah.
Which was a great balance at the time because it meant that the remaining time of the week, 2.5 to 3 days, I could really work on building up my brand, figuring out how I wanted to be known, how that translated on social, and just doing all these things which actually take a lot of time. Now,
boy, they take a lot of time.
Whew. Philip, with one thing I really struggled, so earlier you used to have a team where you delegated, all of a sudden you have to do everything, you write your own copy, you have to be your IT support, you have to be your own accountant, you have to be your sales director, and that takes some getting used to. I really found at the beginning I was much more likely to focus on administrative things, but actually what I did need to do was actually picking up the phone and chasing people on warm leads, but you learn, right?
Right. I had the same experience when I was starting mine, and because I did, I didn't have that revenue coming in, so I actually had a lot of time to build the brand assets, the social media channels, the website, all of that sort of stuff, and start producing content. Because I relied on content to be my sales, my lead engine, which I was really successful in doing. But by the same token, I think it was because I was so kind of shell-shocked coming out of that kind of an environment that I did focus on that administrative stuff, rather than sometimes focusing on what I really should have been paying attention to, which was generating, client leads and looking at how I was going to generate revenue.
I think that's really interesting. For me, what really made a difference, so I had a really regular retainer client, and I kind of got into this comfortable space. I was going to all the conferences I wanted to go to. I was making good money. It took me losing this retainer client. They're still working with me a little bit, but overnight I lost a lot of my regular income.
Oh, interesting.
But actually that was a great moment because it made me launch something new, and it made me take some really scary actions. I all of a sudden went out, had speaking gigs, I pushed my content delivery more forward, and I launched a new service, and I'm actually so glad that it happened. It was pretty scary, because like everyone else, I have a family, I have a mortgage to pay, I have regular outgoings, but probably was the best thing ever.
So tell us about your brand. What's it called? What is it that you do? And your specialty. How has it changed?
So my company is called Lollipop Social, and it's pretty much a name I came up with, and I didn't really know what I was going to do.
Why Lollipop?
Well, Lollipop. So I'm German. I live in England, and
see, that's the thing about Nicole's accent, which I have trouble with, which is that she's German, but she has a British accent. And it's this very weird combination that my brain gets super confused. But it's lovely. I'm just like, I don't know whether I'm listening to a German accent or an English accent.
Bit of both.
Bit of both. It's a bit of both.
It's a bit of both. So I live in London, and I regularly take my son back to Germany to meet the extended family. And he absolutely hated all the queuing at the airport. And who doesn't? But when you're a small child, you really show that you don't like it. So a lollipop always made the situation better.
Okay.
And what I had figured out by then, that what I always loved doing is make people look better, whether that was bosses I used to work with or helping people on social media. So I thought, right, so right now, whilst I don't know yet what I'm going to do, let's use Lollipop Social, let's run with it. And because it taps into, I guess, certain traits of my personality, I'm relatively bubbly, and I talk about things like...
Nicole is bubbly. Just making a note of that.
A little bit. I talk about things like sweet like social, and then I really played onto my Germanness, because I believe what's really good in personal branding, if you dig really deep, what's your why are you different, what makes you different from your competition? And I knew one thing which was different about me was that I was a German living in London, so I use this a lot, and it kind of just still worked out. I have to be honest with you, Philip, if I was to do it all again, I would go back to just using my name, but at the time I just wasn't feeling confident enough.
Oh, interesting.
I felt I wanted to hide behind something, and I wanted to give me this persona, and it has worked. But if I was to do it again, I'd go for NicoleOsborne.com, no doubt.
Really?
Yeah, I would, because I just believe it offers you that flexibility to evolve your services.
Yes.
So I'm forever known as a person, Lollipop Social, who perhaps does social media management.
Yeah.
But actually what I do now is personal brand and social media coaching, so I advise people on
You could always just drop social.
Absolutely. Could
Lollipop
do, yes.
Agency, Lollipop Media.
Yep.
I don't know. We'll work on that.
But you know what I actually found, and funny enough, I did a vlog on this really recently, that it almost doesn't matter so much what you choose as a name, as long as you feel passionate about it, and it is something which you can relate to, your audience can relate to. Then
there's a story. Do you tell that story about the queuing at the airport?
I do. It's two things. It's queuing at the airport, and also he's mixed race, so he used to hate going to the hairdresser. So what we would do, we would just give him a lollipop, and it would be kind of fine. Yeah, I do tell it a lot actually, because people ask me,
I like
how did you come
it
up
makes
with
a total
Lollipop
great
Social?
sense. So, okay, so you started your agency and you lost your big retainer clients, so suddenly you had to pay attention to like how you're going to get clients. Did you start developing content?
Yeah, I had done already. That's one thing like you, I started doing really early, because I do really believe in content marketing.
And what were you doing?
I was blogging. I was blogging a lot, and I enjoyed it, because all of a sudden, when you're not part of a corporate company, you can kind of talk about the things you're really passionate about. No one is there to approve them or not approve them. You get a reaction from your audience, and you're guided by that. So I love doing it. And what I found very early on was, whenever I started sharing maybe things I'd struggled with, perhaps like confidence, or saying, yes, I want to do speaking gigs. Whenever I shared those things, it resonated with people. So I had started from this point of view when I expected people want a perfect version. But actually it's all about the journey. I know it sounds a little bit woohoo, but it is all about the journey, and people can tap into that. So I started talking about it, how when you want to be seen on social media, why you might struggle with it, and why you might not want to do it, and how I overcome the struggles. Yes.
So when you were when you were starting doing content and you were blogging? Were you only publishing your blog on your website, or were you going on LinkedIn or some other larger platform? How were you driving people to your site to?
Yeah, so my
blog?
main platform was really my website. I thought it was really important to create a digital home for my services, for my brand, for my content. And I used Twitter a fair bit, which was great. I got to be invited to Twitter chat guesting, which was brilliant for my branding and perception. But then I also did LinkedIn. And for me, LinkedIn is actually, to date, one of the best platforms. I have ventured out into YouTube.
Okay.
I know you've got an amazing channel, and I'm constantly commenting on your videos because I just love them. I'm very much still at the beginning journey, but I do like to share my tips via YouTube as well, because video is so powerful, isn't it? Because people get an idea of what's that person like to be working with. And I think that's so important. When it is you're selling yourself, you need to show people what you're like.
I think that's one of actually probably the most important things about video and being used as content for business development, because when people do see me on YouTube and they recognize that I know what I'm talking about and that I'm not some flake, and when they do call me up and they're saying, I need help with my brand strategy or my website or consulting or whatever that is, they already know that they want to work with me.
Absolutely.
And they already feel like they know me. And so it's this interesting thing that, a lot of times when you're a marketer and you're working with a client, you have to have that initial conversation where you're proving yourself and you're talking about your portfolio and your capability set and all that sort of stuff. But when you've done video and there's this level of transparency to who you are, how you talk, what you know, they come in the door feeling like they know you already. And it's almost weird because you don't feel like you know them. And so you have to kind of find out who they are and what they're doing and what their priorities are. And so it's actually kind of nice because as a marketing person or a branding person, you always want to be diving into asking questions because what you will be doing for them relies on the answers to those questions, or whether you're even appropriate to be working with them relies on those questions. So I found it to be super helpful. Have you gotten any traction around from YouTube or video to experience anything like that?
Yeah, do you know what I find so amazing? So obviously content on YouTube lives for such a long time, right?
Yes.
And I regularly go to marketing conferences in England, and people will come up to me and they'll talk about videos, which I perhaps had recorded a year ago.
Yeah.
And I find that so special. That wouldn't happen on any other platforms. And just what you said there, it really does happen. If you are yourself in your videos, of course, perhaps the best version of yourself. I mean, let's just face it.
I
right?
try.
Both of us.
Not always, though.
That's a good thing, because the people will come to you who you actually would enjoy working with. And I think that's so important, because when you're running your own business, you are in charge of who you're working with. I know in the beginning you probably have to be more flexible who you work with and where you get your money from. But once you develop your own branding and you build your audience, you can choose, which is amazing. And if you are yourself, you will find the kind of people you really enjoy working with.
So who are the people that you work with?
So at the moment, my target audience is split, as much as I don't like to admit it, because I think niching is so important. So one of them are founders and small business owners of usually tech companies, because for them it's really important to be seen on social, to build up their thought leadership, even though that's a really old-fashioned term, it is still out there. So I work with those guys.
Influencers.
Absolutely, influencers. Yeah, that's a bit more happening. But then it's also single business owners who perhaps don't know social media very well. They know their area of expertise really well. So I'm working with a physiotherapist. I work also with a couple of social media managers, which is interesting. And I help them to really define what's their offering, how does that relate to their audience, what's their story, and to really get to that sweet spot where they can relate to their audience, they're comfortable about sharing their story. Because let's face it, you and I, we've been quite strategic about which bits of our story we share, because there's certain bits we like to keep private. Again, it is...
I don't keep anything.
Do you know, no. I always like to say, because I love cake, I was like, this is like my chocolate cake model where perhaps you have 8 slices and you decide, let's say, if each of those slices is an element of your story, perhaps your upbringing, your experience, what you're passionate about, you choose which slices you share, because then you can be comfortable sharing your story without feeling you're giving too much away. So I help them work that out, and once they do, I teach them how to post these things on social media, and it's great to see. They become really confident, because that's my aim, to get them through the program so that they can just post on their own social media and get business from it.
I find it really fascinating that you're working with social media people and helping them with their social media. And one of the things, and I'd like to ask you about this, is that one thing I find is that it's difficult to get an objective perspective of yourself or of even how you're coming across, your own story, your own messaging. And sometimes you have to talk to another marketer to get some feedback that you really trust around what you're doing. Even if you're a marketer or branding person or a creative professional, to get that feedback from another creative professional, another marketer around your work, right? Have you, apart from you're doing that from your clients, how do you do that for you? How do you get feedback on what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, so I did my own personal branding journey when I started. So I went out to some of my old contacts, some of my clients, and I actually said, look, what is it like working with me? Come back with some short stuff.
Like a 360 kind of.
Yeah, you don't have to like spend a lot of time on it. But what is it? And do you know what I came back to a lot and different angles was, Nicole, when we talk to you, we just feel better. We are clearer on where we need to get to and we feel more we can do it. And I thought, wow, that lends itself so well to coaching. So yeah, I do seek that feedback. And I guess when we are quite active with our content, you do get constant feedback, right?
Yes, you do.
But I
hopefully, if it's good content.
So I knew that I'd done something well with my personal branding when people started recognizing me and they came up to me and said, "Hey, Nicole, yeah, that relates to me. You just like your videos," and I loved hearing that because that was my aim. I wanted to be authentic, and I know that's such an old-fashioned word, but I heard earlier today in the conference, Social Media Marketing World here in San Diego, authentic is just another way of saying it's okay to not be completely perfect all the time. It's okay to let people in, and I think that's so powerful, sharing behind-the-scenes content of what it's like to work with you, how you scope out your projects, how you prepare for a talk. So yeah, it's interesting, but yeah, always get feedback and don't be afraid of it. And you actually want negative feedback as well, or constructive feedback, because it helps you to improve, right?
And that is, as you're talking about your cake analogy, where you're sharing certain things but not all of it, that's, I think, one of the hardest things about exhibiting authenticity or being vulnerable, because it is being vulnerable. And I was talking to Chris Tucker about this earlier today, where he was saying, you have to be almost painfully vulnerable. But you always keep something for yourself, right? You don't, you're not blogging about you brushing your teeth, or like right when you get in the shower, you like draw the line somewhere. But people want to know about the person behind the personality, right? And so how much of that can you share comfortably? And for everybody, it's different. So for you, when it comes to sharing that vulnerability part, what's the line you draw? Where do you do that?
It's a really good question. It's challenging, right? So I would probably, when I'm preparing a talk for an event, I always think, you want to give 150% and you want to create an experience. So I would probably share more when I'm doing an events talk than perhaps I would do in some of my videos or in my blogs, because it's kind of more intimate, isn't it?
Really?
And
so like up on a stage, you feel it's more intimate.
If it supports the story, and I often talk about how you overcome things to build your business. Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. So the first thing I did actually is really just check in with my stakeholders. And I don't mean anyone fancy. Frankly, I mean my family, my mum, my husband. And we talk about the things I could potentially share, and we draw the line together, because
really, you include them in like what you're going to be sharing.
Absolutely, I think it's so important, because once you do that,
I never thought about that.
Once you do that, you can own whatever you're sharing, because they're happy with it. So yeah, I have done this, because I mean, like everyone, we have our ups and downs in our lives, and how much of it we want to share.
True.
We have to check with our stakeholders.
Check with the stakeholders. Check with the board.
Absolutely.
That's so funny. So we're here at Social Media Marketing World, and we're hearing a lot of, new trends in social media, and what's currently important, what people are seeing on the horizon as being important. We are both marketing people and have developing personal brands for ourselves. We're kind of hooked into that world. But for the people who are listening and watching, what are you hearing here that you think that people who are just starting on that journey of building, a personal presence or a personal brand for themselves to be independent, that they should be paying attention to?
Yeah, so one of the first things is really showing up. So figuring out, where's your audience? What are they interested in? What are their pain points? And pick a platform and show up on that platform. And the good thing is, it's not like you putting something out into print. You know, I used to be responsible for big billboards or for having thousands of newspapers printed with an ad I had created. You know, if you get it wrong, you can tweak things on your digital channels. So don't let the need for perfection hold you back. Just start somewhere. Know your why, know your audience, and see how you can match those things, essentially.
I get a lot of questions about finding my audience. Like, how do I find the people who would be interested in hearing what I have to say, or where do I find them to talk to them? When you're looking and thinking about your business and the avatar that you is your most appropriate client, how do you determine where they are?
So obviously, if you're a large company, you have a luxury, you have a customer
you have a research
relationship
department.
systems.
We're not talking about that.
But when it's just you, it's much trickier, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I started off looking at the kind of people I would like to work with. And I actually did a little bit of very friendly social stalking. What do I mean by that? I looked them up on Facebook, I looked them up on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I went into Facebook groups and I figured out what kind of pain points they're talking about. I tested those ideas when I went to events. And you kind of see where you get the feedback.
With individual people or like on stage?
Individual people, so, you know, like when you talk to them during the breaks, you kind of get some feedback of where they're at in their business, what are their challenges. But yeah, it is really tricky. I guess the beauty is that you could post something similar on different platforms and you will see straight away, you know, where was it liked, where was it shared, where did you get the most comments. So you can, very early on in your journey, and you don't even have to have a big audience, you can be guided by that pretty early as soon as you look at the analytics. Then you can also look at your Google Analytics to see which pieces of content resonate the most, where we're clicking to, what kind of lead magnets would work. So it is a bit of trial and error. I wish there was a more scientific approach. I'm sure it is, but I believe when you're starting out, you just won't have access to all the data.
Well, there may not be a lot of data coming in at the beginning, which is, and then you kind of grasp onto straws, but it builds over time, right? So when you were looking at, how often do you look at Google Analytics or, you know, kind of count your views or your comments? Is it kind of constantly in the back of your head, so as you're going through your day, you think about that, or do you say once a week or once a month, I do kind of a concerted hour of looking at everything?
So clearly I'm German, so I like to be relatively organized.
See, yes.
So I have a content production day very regularly in my diary. And as part of that, obviously looking at new content ideas, I then review my Google Analytics. Now, I'm not obsessed with my stats on social media because I think that's way too short term. So yes, I mean, I'll notice which posts have done more and I'll create more of those, but I'm not very much sort of like constantly measuring. As long as I do it regularly, I can see the impact on the traffic on my website, I can see the impact on the sign up on my email list, you know, how much are people opening my emails, clicking, I am happy. Do you know, I think it's, when you're running your own business, you have to be really smart with where you focus your efforts, right? And I think, to me, if I was going too much into the data sort of rabbit hole, it could be almost be like this admin job again I should be doing. That actually I should be focusing on building my brand and you know, following up some leads.
Yeah. So you look at it from a 20,000 foot level.
Absolutely. But
crazy down in the weeds.
I do have some fabulous content creation days, and I love them because it's kind of giving yourself permission to not do any client work, but actually work on your own content.
Yes. That's very smart, I think, because we can, you know, and I do that as well. It's hard when you feel like you're being pulled in a number of directions.
Yeah.
When you're doing client work and you're building a personal brand, sometimes it can feel like you have two jobs. Does it feel that way for you?
Yeah, my best friend is really my Google Calendar, and I guess many working parents will have that there. You have a limited amount of time available, so I try to aim to have a certain percentage for client work and a certain percentage for working on my business. It doesn't always work out that way, but this is the intention behind it, yeah.
Well, Nicole, it has been so wonderful talking to you. I'm so glad you made time for me here at the Social Media Marketing World Conference. And so, where can people find Lollipop Social, and where do you show up, and what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm feeling so privileged that you invited me. So the best way to find out more about me is my website, which is www.lollipopsocial.co.uk. .co.uk. You will find all the details about my Wunderstars program and my personal branding content on there. The platform I'm most likely to be is LinkedIn, so do search for me. It's Nicole Osborne 1, and that's how I come up. And I would love to connect with people. Of course, any questions they have, please let me know.
Well, great, Nicole. Thank you again for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been so great. Thank you.
Okay.